Hello and welcome to Strait Talk. I'm Ayse Suberker. Israeli tanks have entered Rafah, defying international calls for an immediate ceasefire in Gaza. Late on Monday night, Netanyahu's war cabinet unanimously decided to invade the last refuge of displaced Palestinians in the besieged enclave. Türkiye had previously warned against the move and is stepping up its diplomatic pressure on Israel. This month, Ankara halted all trade with Israel and is backing a genocide case at the International Court of Justice. Safiya Amri has more.
Not only is it burning homes and hospitals, Israel is also burning bridges. And now the diplomatic and economic consequences are starting to pile up. Turkish Foreign Minister Hakan Fidan, who was in Gambia for an OIC summit, said resistance against Israeli occupation is no longer a war between Israel and Palestine, but a struggle between oppressors and the oppressed worldwide. Ankara has condemned Israel's continuous disregard of international law, saying it will join South Africa's case at the International Court of Justice.
Türkiye olarak Güney Afrika'nın
We decided to join the court case filed by South Africa against Israel in the International Court of Justice. With this step, we expect the process in the International Court of Justice to proceed in a right way.
ediyoruz.
South Africa formally accused Israel of genocidal acts against Gaza's population in December last year. The court then ordered Israel to take all possible measures to prevent any civilian deaths or destruction, stopping short from ordering an end to the war on the besieged enclave. But Israel and its allies have disregarded the ruling and called the accusations baseless.
I witnessed the 1967 war and all the following wars, but this is genocide, a massacre. They want to wipe us out.
But it's not the only pressure Israel is seeing. Türkiye became Israel's largest trade partner to halt all commercial exchanges until a permanent ceasefire is achieved and uninterrupted aid enters Gaza. The trade volume between the two countries reached nearly $7 billion last year, according to the latest official data. Top exports to Israel include steel, vehicles, plastics, and electrical devices, while imports were dominated by fuels. But this decision was not taken abruptly. Ankara recalled its ambassador in Israel last year in protest of the high civilian casualties. The UN says it could possibly take 16 years to rebuild what Israel destroyed in 7 months, if the conflict stops today. But Netanyahu is determined to invade what's left of Gaza, the small town of Rafah, home to about 250,000 displaced Palestinians and previously designated as a safe zone by Israel. Only time will tell whether his continued defiance against the growing international pressure will result in real consequences. Safiya Amri, Strait Talk.
And to discuss Turkey's growing diplomatic pressure on Israel, joining me now from Cape Town is Ebrahim Rasool. He is the former South African ambassador to the United States. And from Ankara, Ahmet Keser. He is a professor at Hasan Kalyoncu University. Gentlemen, welcome to Strait Talk. It's good to have you on the program. So, Ebrahim, following a decision by Israel's war cabinet on Monday night, Israeli tanks have entered Rafah. What's next now?
Look, I think that what we certainly need to do is to ensure that there is respect for the orders of the ICJ and that we are able to ensure that that Israel is kept to it. And at this moment, it's not so much the diplomatic pressure that will make Israel realize that. It is the popular pressure across the universities of the United States, of Europe, and across the world. It is the street that is putting that kind of pressure on Israel. And I think in the election year, that has to count for the way in which policy is made by the Biden administration, especially that the Biden administration must restrain Israel from further genocide and further war crimes.
So, Ahmet, Ebrahim says diplomatic pressure is not working. He says so. So what about the economic one? Because last week, Turkey announced that it had suspended all trade with Israel until aid was allowed into Gaza. What do you make of this decision? Is this an important step?
For sure. Of course, when we read the figures, it is not maybe too much when comparing other countries, but even in this case, there is a $10 billion of a trade volume between the two countries, which is especially for the advantage of Turkey. But even in this case, Turkey started to implement such kind of a halt regarding this issue. Hopefully, this will have an impact especially on the public opinions within Israel, and it will increase the tensions against the government when the impacts are started to be felt by the people inside.
So, Ebrahim, Turkish President Erdogan has said Turkey has become the world's top provider of aid to Gaza, having sent a total of 50,000 tons of humanitarian assistance. How is this going to be affected with the latest decision to suspend trade ties with Israel?
Look, I think that both Turkey and South Africa are facing enormous pressure for the decisions that we have taken. One to take Israel to the ICJ, the other one to cut trade ties. There's going to be pressure on us. At this moment, the pressure on South Africa is from some senators and Congress people in the US to remove South Africa from the African Growth and Opportunities Act. But I think the scale of devastation in Gaza, the scale of humanitarian crisis in Gaza means that countries like Turkey have to choose between our conscience and our interests. And so I think that Turkey will face that kind of pressure, but I believe that ultimately we are stronger because at the same time, both Turkey and South Africa has to make sure that we give birth to a multilateral world in which the world does not put all its eggs into one superpower's basket so that we are then bullied into decisions that go against our conscience and our values.
So, but Ebrahim, how important was economic pressure on the apartheid government in South Africa back in the 1980s and 1990s to force it to change?
And so, as also the victims of sanctions, in which poor black people also had hardships, we were willing to take that in order to achieve the greater goal, which we did achieve. It forced the South African government into negotiations with Nelson Mandela. It forced Ronald Reagan even to overturn his veto from pressure from the people. And so I believe that much the same thing will happen as my brother Ahmed says, within Israel, when the elites see that they are not being traded with, that the economic growth goes down, the elites put pressure on the government to change their positions and to change their behavior. And that is what has happened in South Africa. And Turkey's move to cut ties, I think followed by others, will have the exactly same effect on the elites in Israel and in the United States.
So Ahmet, Turkish Foreign Minister Hakan Fidan was in Gambia for the OIC summit a few days ago, where he urged the Muslim world to stand in unity against the Israeli oppression of Palestinians. How do you think it is going to play out? And what's your make of the Muslim world's response to Israel's onslaught on Gaza?
Well, till now, the reactions coming from the Muslim world is not sufficient to stop the Israeli attacks on Gaza. We couldn't, and the people couldn't reach any concrete result regarding having a sustainable ceasefire agreement as well. Even if the Hamas has already declared that they agreed to attend the meetings in Cairo. But I think Turkish government is now starting to push all the buttons at the same time, in the diplomatic side, in the economic side, even in the legal side, in the International Court of Justice, etc., to put the pressure on the Israeli government, together with the bottom way and rows increasing in all over the world, especially, for example, in the United States, together with protests all over the universities, for example. So I think the power will come from the unification of the people all over the world. This bottom wave, the public opinion, will affect the elites, as already mentioned by our friend.
So, Ebrahim, recently Ireland, Malta, Norway and Slovenia have joined calls from Spain to hold an international peace conference that would result in a viable Palestinian state recognized by the West. So are efforts to grant a greater recognition to of a Palestinian state gaining some steam within the European Union?
I think people see that as the only sustainable solution. The problem is that those kind of calls come so late after so many settlements have been placed on on Palestinian lands. The roads have been walled and so forth, to make the viability of that state almost improbable. But the fact of the matter is that they now recognize that, and Netanyahu has said that he's not even interested, and his right-wing partners are saying they're not interested in a Palestinian state. And so it's a lot that comes too late at this point. But I think we need to go for the viability of it, and we need particularly the Muslim world to buy into a vision of a Palestinian state that at least has the 67 borders uninterrupted, or at best has a democratic state, binational, non-religious, over the whole area. But certainly I think statecraft is going to be very, very important. And maybe this is where Türkiye can play a role, because already we've seen the pushback on normalization. What we now need is a massive push for a solution to the conflict and to the state crisis that exists for the Palestinians.
So speaking of Turkey's importance, Ahmet, the Turkish government called on Muslim countries, as we've been talking, to put more pressure on Israel to end its attacks on Palestinians. But what tools do they have at hand to stop Israel?
When we look at the Muslim countries, especially, for example, the Gulf countries have really large resources concerning the oil products, natural gas, etc., which Israel is already dependent so much on these ones, especially for continuing their military operations. So stopping this kind of trade, for example, about oil products, or as in the case of Turkey, for example, Israel was heavily dependent on steel and iron industry, for example, from outside. So if these Muslim countries stop exporting these kind of products to Israel, it will have an influence both on the businessmen, all the tradesmen, and especially the citizens inside Israel. So the public opinion and the tension will only the unique tool which may have a potential to change the government policies as of now. Other than that, we don't see any change in the upcoming programs or projects about invasion of the whole Gaza from the Israeli government.
So, Ebrahim, it seems like Muslim countries have fallen short of putting the efficient pressure on Israel. But what do you make of several Central and South American countries' decisions to cut ties with Israel?
You know, we may not have won a ceasefire at the ICJ. We may not have restrained Netanyahu at the ICJ. But what has been achieved is that we have completely changed the narrative of Israel as the victim of history to Israel as a perpetrator of genocide. We've changed the narrative of Israel in a war of self-defense to Israel as an aggressive occupier. And we've changed the narrative of Palestinians as subhumans, as terrorists, to Palestinians as human beings. That is what is sparking all of this, not only in the northern countries where the campuses are aflame, but particularly in the countries of the south, where they are saying, we must stop this genocide. We must do what we can, because Israel is not some kind of holy cow that must be wrapped up in cotton wool and protected against criticism. I think whatever comes out of this, that is a lasting achievement of the ICJ, and it would be great if Türkiye comes to the party, joins South Africa in the ICJ, and starts a flood of people joining us in order to amplify that message.
All right, gentlemen, unfortunately, we'll have to leave it here. Thank you very much for joining me on Strait Talk.